Aloha, welcome to Facing Our Future. I'm your host, Angus McKelvey, and once again, we look at subjects and issues and trends facing our future in Hawaii. Today, we're joined by a young, dynamic candidate for the State House, one of the new faces in Hawaii politics, the reemergence and change that is occurring in this system. I'm very happy to be joined by Jarret Keohokalole, right? Did he kill you?
Keohokalole.
I'm getting good better at this. Jarret, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, you know, as we do with everything, we kind of give our audience a 30,000-foot view. Who is Jarret? What is your background, and what got you involved in wanting to be in the new face of politics in Hawaii?
Yeah, I grew up in Kaneohe. I was born and raised there. My dad was a construction worker, my mom was a nurse, and they were both active in the community. My dad was a labor leader, and so politics was always something that was interesting to me. I remember sign waving and canvassing for candidates when I was a kid. And so I graduated from high school at St. Louis and then on to UH and UH Law School. And I graduated from UH Law School last year. And I really started taking public service really seriously, you know, as a potential path for me in law school. And so I'm excited to be a part of the process and grateful to be where I am right now.
We've got a lot of support from the community, which was really amazing. When you go door to door, when you were out in the community talking to people, were you sensing this wave of change that seems to have emerged during the primary? Were people coming to you and basically, it's been called the Scandinavia model, where, you know, a new face, they're going to vote for a new face even though they may be happy with the person or the administration. Did you see a lot of that when you were reaching out to the community?
Absolutely, yeah. There was a lot of it. It was, well, fortunately for me, I'm a new candidate, but it was, I think all of the candidates in our race benefited from that because it was an open race. There was no incumbent. So I just tried to knock on as many doors as possible to be the face, the new face for them. But there was a lot of, I think, disenchantment with the system and people feeling like they needed to be heard or that there was a loss of that connection to government. And that's a lot of what I encountered at the doors. And it wasn't for, you know, it was for a wide range of issues, you know, political issues all the way down to, you know, I don't like the way the sidewalk looks on this corner. You know, we need to get that fixed, and that's all I care about. So, but I do think there is something to this, you know, sort of movement that people want new, fresh faces in government. And I got a lot of folks who told me at the doors, we want to get all the old guys out.
All those old dinosaurs out?
Yeah. So you got to watch yourself.
People like me, yeah. Don't worry, I'm hearing about it, trust me. But there is always life after politics. Do you think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing this trend of voters, you know, wanting to see new faces, that people are looking, you know, they think that, you know, it's becoming a career, full-time career type of thing. It's not, they feel that service is missing now, that it's becoming more career-oriented. Is that something you picked up upon in discussing things with your constituents?
I do. I've had a lot of people express frustration with the benefits that politicians receive after they accrue certain amounts of time. I think there's a lot of angst over the stalemate in Washington, and that's spilled over into local politics.
Definitely.
And then there are also, you know, you're well aware of the sort of, you know, struggles and difficulties that have happened at the state level and at the county level. And so I think that all has played a part into it. You know, there is a lot, I felt a lot of energy and a lot of support for new fresh faces, you know, in government.
So you think that, you know, let's just say that, you know, looking ahead, you're successful, you know, you serve your community. When you go back in 2 or 4 years, how do you continue to put that fresh face forward? Or do you think it's a matter of just staying in touch, staying at that grassroots level so they know you're there, and that kind of attaches itself to the fresh face?
Yeah, I do think that's the main thing, and that's what I tried to do in the campaign, was to just stay connected to the community and stay visible. I think it was helpful that I'm from that community. I have a lot of family. I have a lot of folks who knew my family or were connected to people that I knew, and that network was larger than I imagined. And so that really helped, for me as a new candidate to get my name out and to connect with people. But I think that brings a lot of obligation, because it's not I don't think it's the type of constituent and politician relationship that a lot of people think you get. For me, these are people who know my dad, my grandmother, my uncles, people that I see at the store, at Windward Mall. And so I need to answer to those people when I take my kids to the movies, and that's something that I take very seriously. And so that's the way that I want to approach, moving forward if I do win.
Yeah, and what's really, amazing about your community is pretty diverse, isn't it? Very many people from different backgrounds. What's the basic demographics of your area?
Well, there's a large Native Hawaiian community. We do have a lot of new arrivals. We have a Marine base right just outside the district, so there are a lot of military families. And then I think there's a lot of local families though. People who have been here for multiple generations. And I think that's something that's a key part of our community, is these rooted local families who are trying to keep their family together and keep them here. And that was something that I really focused on in my campaign, because I think that's very important, is trying to keep our community intact. So,
do you see tension, like what's happening in some other communities, between the local people who've been in the community for many generations or years, and those who are coming in or newer, tend to be a little bit more wealthier, from the mainland? Is that kind of tension be seeing in your neck of the woods as it is in other areas like the neighbor islands?
I don't think it's on the surface in the same way that you're saying in terms of other communities. I think there is some churn, and that's a natural part of what's going on in Hawaii. The fact that housing is short, and jobs are few and good paying jobs that pay a living wage are few and far between. And so you have a lot of families who are second, third, fourth. My family's been there for 7 generations, and the kids that they're raising are finding fewer opportunities to get well educated and to be able to compete for the jobs that are available. And as a result, we're having those folks move away and having new people come in. And I don't think that's any particular group or individual's fault. That's just sort of what's going on in our community.
Yes.
Maybe under the surface more than in some other communities.
And so as a community leader, because you are running to be a community leader, do you feel that it's part of your kuleana to try to make sure that the community stays ingrained, stays connected, that there isn't this churn, it doesn't become so caustic that it starts to pull at the fibers of the community itself?
Yeah, that's a big deal for me. Just from the perspective of my family, my wife and I were actually living on the mainland after we graduated from college. We went there to, pursue career, and when we decided to start having our family, we came home because both her family and my family are in Kaneohe, and we wanted to raise them where we're from, and we wanted our kids to be from Hawaii, and it's very difficult to do that, and I think we need to just make sure that that's a priority. And that's something that I think a lot of people in our community, that's really resonated with a lot of people in our community. That the grandkids are living on the mainland and they're not Kama'aina. And so what can we do to provide better opportunities for our families to stay within the state first, but within our communities?
Yes. So that leads me to the next question then, to turn the heat up a little bit here. What would you do? What to try to create this opportunity? Let's take it from the job sector first. There's been talk about, as my good friend off camera here is, there's been talk about the fact that we don't have any type of economic incentives. There's nothing to keep companies here in Hawaii once they grow and move on, and there's no kind of mechanism to make sure that they hire locally. What ideas have you thought about or like to see maybe along those lines of creating this economic opportunity in Hawaii for young people?
Well, I think when you look on the economic side, a lot of it just has to do with cost. I mean, in general, cost of living is a big concern. It's the main reason why I think a lot of local families are leaving, but it's also one of the major reasons why we have trouble keeping businesses here and recruiting businesses here, you know, because we're so reliant on the boats that come in. So I do think one sector of our economy that you folks at the legislature have been focusing on, and I think we need to pay continued attention to it and see where we can, you know, take advantage most efficiently, is in energy independence and renewables. I think we need to look at building better infrastructure to allow us to take advantage of renewables. Part of that is the grid and working with HECO. I've heard that a lot from people in our community. But I think other things like providing better infrastructure for electric vehicles, you know, working on solar, working on some of these other renewable technologies. There are opportunities for us to take advantage of these technologies here, and I think it would benefit everybody.
When you were going to your community, was there a lot of, you know, I guess, frustration with the utilities and being able to hook up their photovoltaic systems to the circuits and not being able to get that circuit space? Do you think that it was a bigger issue of having the benefits of renewable energy for the homeowner, the lower stable costs of electricity? What did you see? Was it more of a, hey, I want to get my PV on my roof, or how do I get my electrical bill lowered?
I think that it was a bit of a mix, but there were a lot of homeowners who were not happy about the fact that they weren't allowed to take advantage of, you know, the benefits of solar. I think, but at the same time, you know, I think our community is in general very pragmatic, and so I did hear from a lot of folks who also said, on the other hand, you know, it is unfair that you have renters and folks in condominiums, you know, they didn't want the folks who are unable to take advantage of solar, you know, subsidizing, in some cases, what, you know, some of the situations that we've had where folks are you know, taking more advantage of PV than potentially would benefit the overall community. But I think in general, it's just being able to push that and make sure that HECO is focusing on moving their grid, you know, improvements forward in a way that's fair and equitable and will get everyone, you know, in a position to benefit from that as soon as possible.
Do you think on the HECO front, is it just a matter of providing additional resources, extra engineers, and, you know, others to create these infrastructure circuit level upgrades, or do you think there needs to be a carrot-stick approach of incentives, assistance, but also strong benchmarks of being able to up the penetration from the circuits? Or how do you see being able to work with the utilities or to be able to advocate for more room in the circuit, especially given the instability allegedly that's occurring across the grid all over the island of Oahu?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question.
Welcome to the show.
Something that you, I'm sure, are very well aware of. I think that it's a balance. I think that we need to continue to make sure HECO understands they need to be moving on this as fast as is safely possible. But on the other hand, I'm also not an electrical engineer. And so I do understand the concerns about safety, you know, the concerns about brownouts and these things. I think we need to continue to make sure that the light is being shined on HECO to make sure that they are moving forward in as expeditious a manner as possible. And whether it is, you know, hiring more people or investing more money in infrastructure, or, you know, overhauling the system, I think we just need to make sure we keep our ears open and stay focused on that. Because I think at the legislature especially, it's very easy to take the light off of an issue and focus it somewhere else. And then that issue just goes away. And then we're dealing with it 8 or 9 or months or a year later, you know. So I think we just need to continue to keep the pressure on HECO, you know, in short, to make sure they're moving forward in the best way possible.
The never-ending challenge of moving forward in our future, trying to hold those accountable and also creating new ideas in energy as well as sustainability. We'll be right back after these words from our lovely co-sponsors, but to talk more about the future, energy, and perhaps sustainability. Can it be achieved? We'll be right back.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay, we're back here on Facing Our Future, and we're joined with our guest here, Jarret. Thank you so much for coming and being here. And we were talking energy, talking utilities, keeping our eyes open. You know, solar and PV has been discussed as one of the, you know, when you hear renewable, you think PV, right? But in your area and a lot of areas where you have not great solar penetration, cloud cover, other types of alternative energies, you know, could perhaps be a part of the whole renewable mix. Are there any types of other alternative energies that you are interested in, that you think needs to be a part of the overall renewable energy mix?
Yes, and I think the overall what we need to keep in mind is that we need to be flexible enough to be able to receive the energy if someone is able to come up with the technology that's going to work the best for Hawaii, and, you know, opens up a new frontier for us. They're field testing fuel cell, you know, vehicle development on the Marine base. They're also doing ocean generating electricity projects. There's wind and solar, and, you know, there's also geothermal. And I think when you look at the grid as an example of being flexible to make sure we can take best advantage of renewable energy, you look at the grid, from my perspective, it's probably a project that we should have been taking a look at in terms of upgrading the grid to receive solar 30 years ago. You know, now it's easy for me to, you know, grumble in hindsight. That's what we should have been doing. So I think the lesson we need to take from that situation, the situation we're in now with the grid and these solar, you know, PV caps, is that we need to make sure that as we move forward, we're able to take advantage of whatever new technology is on the horizon. And as we can see, as we've seen in the last 5 years, you know, those technologies are coming. There's a market for them. People want them. And so let's make sure at the government level, we're able to take advantage of them when they do arrive.
Yeah, exactly. And so hydroelectric, I bring it up only because, you know, in your area, you have a lot of rivers, a lot of rain outpouring. It's been something that's kind of starting to catch steam in Kauai and on parts of Maui. Do you think that there's a role for hydro in your district, or are there concerns about hydro insofar as the relationship with the environment and the Oahu ecosystem?
I think when you look at our district, particularly Waiahole, which is on the edge of our district, it's the northern boundary that a lot of people take for granted. We have a history here of keeping the area rural and making sure that we pay attention to the impacts of these technologies and development overall on our environment and our ecosystems. Part of that is the Bay. I grew up on the Bay. I care very deeply for the management of the Bay. I want to make sure that it continues to be a source of food and not just a piece of scenery, you know, in our community. And so I think just like any of these other technologies, wind, geothermal, ocean, we need to make sure that the technologies that we are developing and the ones that we are going to look forward to using are ones that we're able to actually implement in a sustainable way. So when it comes to hydroelectric, the first thing I think of is the fights that have taken place over the years to protect the stream flows in our communities, and what will be what the impacts of those new technologies are going to have on the resources that we've spent so much time and energy fighting to protect. So again, I do think it's a balance, and we just need to make sure that we proceed with our eyes wide open on all of these projects.
Do you think hydro, though, creates an economic incentive to restore stream flow? Like in the case of Nihiku, HCNS had to restore stream flow to the stream for their hydro, which powers their community center and everything else. So now we have an economic incentive to restore stream flow, not beyond the right thing to do in trying to keep the culture and the ecosystem healthy. Do you think that it could be an advantage for your community in being able to restore stream flow and create this economic nexus to not divert the water back over to the other side of the island?
Well, so I think we should take advantage of as many of those. What a great idea!
Great idea.
But those are the types of projects that we should constantly be focusing on implementing, particularly the ones where you can get communities involved. You know, there are dozens of programs in the state of Hawaii that require additional funding, that deserve additional funding, and we just don't have the funding for. And so anytime, and I've been a big advocate for this in education, in community resource management, in environmental protection and enforcement, in finding ways to get the community involved, to help empower people who are already, you know, out on the bay, utilizing the resource, who know the resource best, and get them to get in and manage these resources in a way that works best for the community. So if we can do that in different aspects of our, you know, of our governance and from a policy level, those are things we should definitely look into.
Well, do you think that then to switch gears into, you know, conservation, resource management, one of the concerns has always been, you know, that we have lack of enforcement, lack of eyes, you know, in places like Kaneohe Bay and areas that are very, especially those that are marine reserves and others. Do you think that that's perhaps the way to address more enforcement without having to create more dollars in government, especially when there may not be any available, to get these people who are using the bays to become like the eyes and ears out there for the community and for the state?
Absolutely. And I think when you talk to, well, from my perspective, when I've talked to enforcement officers, people that work at the DLNR, prior to this position, I worked at the DLNR doing invasive species work, and had a lot of contact with the folks in enforcement. And what I think the majority of them will tell you is that when you have community policing, you have in areas where you have community policing, you have areas that are complying with these regulations, and you have well-managed resources. And so the fact of the matter is we need to do community policing in order for these environmental regulations to actually be applied.
Exactly, yeah.
Any resource area where you have community policing, you have good environmental management, and there are dozens of examples of areas where you don't have community input and community participation, and the state just does not have the resources to manage those areas.
Yes, exactly. So, and you have one person covering such a huge area, and you have multiple call-ins, multiple issues going on. They have to jump around, and a lot of times you lose the ability to make an arrest, to get evidence of, you know, illegal take, poaching, drift net, whatever. You know, and when you work with the community, especially in the Ahupua'a that you're at, you know, a lot of what has been said, you know, going in management resources, we need to look to the culture of Native Hawaiian, look to how they were able to manage and feed so many people in a sustainable ecosystem. Do you feel that the state, particularly within DLNR and others, needs to really take a concerted look at the traditions and knowledge of the past and the things that could perhaps offer a way to manage resource while still allow people to go out and fish and gather the way they used to? Do you think that's the key for us to look into to create this balance?
I think that it is one of the areas that we really need to pay better attention to. And the fortunate thing is that a lot of that work is already being done. A lot of it is being done in the university system, and a lot of it is actually being done at the Department of Land and Natural Resources now. From working within the agency, I know that there is a lot of attention being paid to getting the communities mobilized and finding not only the members of the community, but the people in the community who are the experts, who are the keepers of the knowledge. And it's not always Native Hawaiians, but there is knowledge there that we should be utilizing to better manage our resources. You know, if like you said, we were able to do it, you know, for hundreds of years without modern technology. And so I think the time is ripe to start applying our modern capabilities with some of this ancient knowledge to see if there's a better way to manage. We can definitely improve the way that we take care of our environment. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to move forward on that.
Well, it also doesn't offer flexibility than more of some of the draconian solutions like complete bans, complete, You know, for case there's a place in area in West Maui where they were looking at a complete ban. The fishermen local community came out and said, you don't need that. You just need to ban the take of the algae-eating species only during certain times so that population stays healthy, but you can still take the predator fish. Do you see that as kind of the way to be able to address that tension which occurs, you know, between those who like to fish and hunt and those who want to, which, you know, they want resource protection, but often it appears that their passion for the protection sometimes over or subdues the views of those who are out there, who who do gather, who do hunt, who do fish. Do you think that's perhaps one of the ways where we can look at creating a balance between, you know, these competing interests, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a good example of that is in Kona, the Makai Watch program, where they've gone into the community and they've talked to the kupuna and the fishermen, and they've been successful in getting people mobilized to self-enforce, and really it's the only way. I think it's something that we just have to focus on doing. For a good example of this, I think, is when you look at some of the regulations that we have on size and take and things like that. Some of these fish species, if you actually go in and talk to the fishermen and the people that know, you know, the schools and where they're at and how they procreate, sometimes it's better to take the smaller fish than it is to take the larger fish, because the larger fish are, you know, the ones that produce the most, you know, baby fish.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're breeding
to
age.
overgeneralize, you know, and if you talk to the folks, what we do know from ancient Hawaiian knowledge is that the way Hawaiians viewed the moon on one side of the island was not the same way they viewed it on the other side of the island. And what that means is that based on the tides, based on the currents, based on the moon, people would judge the seasons of fish differently. And so when you have one fishing season for one species of fish that applies across all the islands, you're forgetting or you're losing the fact that on Molokai, sometimes the fish breed in a different part of the year than they do in Kaneohe. And so these are things we're missing, and it affects the overall picture of management. You're not going to get people to follow you know, overall state rules on fishing and take when they know for themselves that the best season to take the fish is not the season where it's allowed. You know, and that goes all over the place. And there are opportunities to move forward on things like that, utilizing, and what you do by doing that, I think, is you get community involved. You get them to start paying attention to what other people are doing in the Bay. And like you said, a lot of times there aren't enough actual state officers to go in and cite guys and go to court and write up the reports and you know, adjudicate all the way to the point where somebody's paying a fine. You know, as opposed to just having the people on the Bay go, hey, you know, don't take that one. You know, throw them back.
Throw them back. Do the right thing. Think of the future generations. Thinking of the future generations and looking ahead, how do we take stewardship for our environment to take to the other challenges like housing and, more importantly, education? We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard, and I host the show Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series right here every Wednesday from 2 to 3 Hawaii time. I would really love to have you watch the show and see what we do here. I talk with some of the most amazing people, artists, most of them, all of them involved in some sort of artistic process. And our goal here on the show is to dig into that artistic process, and you would not believe what some people say, what some people do, what people go through to express. And these are people who have to express somehow, and I find that infinitely interesting. Not only that they have to express, but how they end up doing it. I really hope that you will watch the show and enjoy talking with some of these people the same way that I do. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon on Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series, Wednesdays from 2 to 3. See you soon.
Aloha, welcome back to Facing Our Future. I'm your host, Angus McKelvey, and we've been talking about the new face of politics, and you should have gone to Jarret. And speaking of Jarret, good to have you again. And we were talking resource management, eyes of the community. Do you think that engagement, Makai Watch, resource management, that all of these things actually serve another more important public purpose that the community is thirsting for, and that's involvement?
Yes,
in government?
I think that's a great point. You know, as I said before, you know, walking the district and talking to people, there were a lot of folks who were frustrated with government because they felt disengaged. They felt like they weren't being heard, that their concerns and ideas were not being taken into account. And I think these provide opportunities, resource management. They provide opportunities for people to get involved, stay connected to their community, have an impact, play a role, and also stay engaged with their representatives and politicians at the legislature.
And that's really important, right? Especially coming from your area, where there's this disconnect. I mean, part of the, I've heard before, like, on that side of the island, you're like a neighbor island, right?
I think definitely people from town consider folks on the Ko'olau side to be way far away from much further away than we actually are.
They think you're all peely grass coming in.
I have family that don't like to go over the mountain, after dark, or they only go for weddings or really important
leave the
events.
pork at home, of course.
Yeah. So I think there is a certain flavor to our side of the island. Yeah.
And don't you feel that's part of the battle? You as a representative from that area, going into downtown here with all of these, big time, big high muck guys, to remind them of the character and importance of the Ko'olau side of the island and what you have to offer and how important it is to get their support on these issues so that your community can remain the quality place that it is?
I think that's a really good point. I think, and you probably experienced this being a representative on the neighbor islands too, which is that sometimes the most important community issues are simple fixes. The roads need to be repaired, and that is something that I've heard. That's probably the concern I've heard the most.
On the roads?
Yeah, is that the roads need to be repaired.
Now, when they talk about the roads, are they talking about the roads like in their neighborhoods, or are they talking about the main road, the freeway that runs through the Kaneohe area?
Well, it depends what part of Kaneohe you're in. If you're on Waikalua Road, it's Waikalua Road. But a lot of times the issues are the ones that are very close to home. And I don't think that's specifically a Kaneohe or Kahaluu thing. I just think that because of the mountain, the folks on the Honolulu side maybe forget a lot of times that there are serious issues that are community-centric that need to be dealt with at the state level. And I think, that's always the challenge being a representative, one of 51, to make sure that those particular specific community issues like Kaneohe Bay, like our roads, are being given the attention that they really need at the legislature with all of the other, things working.
All the pieces moving
Right,
around there.
with
Well, do
all
you
the
think that
pieces
part of it is, like, for instance, from my personally thing, what I try to do is like, okay, this is a problem in my community, it's an issue in my community, it may have this flavor there, but there are other areas like West Oahu, West Kauai, where they're having the same struggles, and reach out to those representatives and senators in their communities to say, hey, we have different flavors, we have the same issue, case point, resource management. Do you think that offers a way for the Ko'olau community and you as a representative to get the support for them is by looking to these other areas that have the same challenges and kind of creating this synergy between them and your communities?
I do, and I think resource management is a really good example of that. And it's a good example because there are different approaches being utilized in different areas right now that we can learn from and stay connected to those communities and figure out together what works. It's not going to work the same way for every community, but we can, make sure we share with each other, make sure we stay connected to each other. And then when there is a good idea that does need support at the legislative level, then we can hui up, like you're saying.
Exactly, yeah. Form that hui, which is strong, because all you need is 26, right? And that's the magic number over the legislature. You are raising your kids here. You have a young family. Obviously, education is something that's important to you, as is to the community. What has been the number one frustration or, I guess, particulated concern with education in Hawaii that you've heard from the voters and you were experiencing as a parent yourself? What are the big things that have come up from that in your campaign?
I think overall, that one is difficult because I think there are different parents at different age ranges. Grandparents have kids of all different age ranges. So I think overall, what I've heard talking to people is just there's a general, I think, dissatisfaction with the end result. And the end result is that we have kids coming out of our school system who are not able to compete for the jobs that are available in Hawaii. You know, I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to people in the business community, in the tourism industry, and there are good jobs available in Hawaii. It's just that we have local kids coming out of school who don't have the tools to compete with people who are coming in, you know, and we do need to take a global approach on this. This is quickly becoming a you know, a more globalized society, and you know, there are good jobs available. There are a few of them that, you know, will provide the type of living wage that allow people to stay in the communities. And what most people just want out of their education system is their kids to graduate and be able to go on to get a good higher education, a quality higher education, or to move into the trades, or come out of school and compete for the good jobs that are available.
So do you think that, you know, along those lines, we should perhaps put more into technical training, more resources there, perhaps more into what they call STEM, science, technology, energy, and math, particularly among, you know, to expand more opportunities in the STEM? Do you think that's part of the solution to try to create this workforce of qualified people, that these jobs in Hawaii they have to fill from people from the mainland?
I think so. I think a lot of it just involves listening and hearing because, you know, just like the resources are different, the communities are different, and they're going to want different things out of their educational system, and that's part of the challenge. And you know, it's just something that we need to make sure that we're accounting for. There's an initiative on our side called the Castle Complex Redesign, where they've brought together, you know, community organizations, businesses, the schools from the entire district, the Castle High School, the intermediate, and the elementary schools, to try and get together and figure out a better way to educate the people the kids in our community. And part of that has been, you know, emphasizing STEM, more STEM educational opportunities, and getting on and working with the community and working with businesses to provide learning opportunities outside the classroom. I think I'm a big advocate of early education, and that's another aspect to it that I think is very important. And when you look at how many states across the country are now emphasizing early education and funding early education, it's something that we are quickly not going to be able to ignore, particularly when we've begun to incorporate national standards. You talk about Common Core and the fact that everybody in the country is being judged on the same level, but you have, you know, so many dozen states who are educating their kids from age 4 up. You know, and we know that those years are particularly important. It's not, you know, we're not on a level playing field with a lot of these other states, and that affects funding, that affects the standards and the testing and all these things that parents are very, very concerned about.
And you know what, the thing is too, there's been some, I guess, tension or disagreement among the early education, you know, it's been supported broadly, but there's been two schools of thought. One is we should go out and engage the private sector, the parochial schools and others, and give them money to run early education programs and not have it being done through the public school system. There's another school of thought whereby it should be completely done within the public school system, and we need to fund it to the point where it is mandatory, which the New York model, of course, showed the best success of. Do you have a particular, you know, I guess, passion on those? I mean, which camp do you think that there's a way to integrate both of them, or do you think the parochial private-public partnership is the best way, or do you think this is something that the state needs to be aggressive on within the public school system and really go through early education through that?
I think we are where we are because we're stuck between not being able to do one and really not being able to do the other as well. I think if we could, I think what the majority of the people I've talked to have said is that they would prefer to have the public school system be the place where the kids are educated. And the fact is, my understanding of the situation is we just don't have the infrastructure for it.
In the public school system.
That's right. And so we're in this situation where we're in the situation that we're at now. Ideally, I'd prefer to have it run through the public school system. I'd prefer to have public school teachers teaching children from, you know, the appropriate age that they should begin their schooling at. which, as we're learning, is much younger than where they're starting now.
So, but that's the infrastructure. Is it a lack of funding for infrastructure to develop these facilities, or is it a space logistical one, like what's happening with the school in Waikiki, where they said we just don't have the room to create more facilities for early education? We're kind of zeroed out. Do you see? I mean, do you see which kind of in your area does it play out, or is it just a combination of both things together?
I think it's one and the same. I mean, when it comes to funding, maybe you can tell me the issue. But at the end of the day, it always, especially with education, at the end of the day, it's going to be funding. It's going to be support for those programs. And I think there's a reasonable argument that's been made by folks who don't approve of making those expenditures for early education, that we need money for the facilities and the schools and the teachers that are teaching the kids that we have in the system now. I think that's a very reasonable argument to make as well. We have kids petitioning the legislature and coming down and waving signs because they want air conditioning, and I talked to a lot of folks who said, well, the kids should just deal with it like we did, but it does impact your ability to learn.
I mean, exactly.
So, I think at the end of the day, it does come down to money. And I think part of this conversation needs to be finding ways to provide those funds to our schools and finding ways to work more efficiently within the system so that we can divert the money to the areas where we can get the best return on our investment.
Okay, so let's go there then. On this, we have so many competing programs and such for the state, and in order to create more revenue for education, would you support something like a general excise tax increase? Would you support special assessments, or do you think there's much to be had within claiming or getting lost tax revenue to the state, finding more efficient ways for the state to operate that could create the revenue to put into the education system?
I think the latter two are the best place to start because they are probably the most realistic for a freshman representative to advocate for.
There's many who advocate who are not freshmen either.
I'm not a fan of raising the general excise tax. So let's just put that aside because I don't think that's a good idea in general. I think we should be going after tax revenues that the state is entitled to. I think there are a lot of people who think that the folks who are not paying their fair share should pay their fair share immediately. And I think there are real opportunities to be more efficient in government. And one of those opportunities, especially within the school system, is to take advantage of renewable energy. You talk about you made a good point that my district does not have, it's not the most feasible district for solar because of the amount of solar energy that we're able to capture on our side because of the clouds and the mountains and those things. But if you look at the schools in our district, they are in the highest capacity zones for PV. And when you look at PV and that solar energy being captured in the middle of the day, one of the big issues that HECO consistently brings up is that the energy that's captured in the middle of the day is not being used by the folks who live in the homes, during peak usage hours, which is 6, 7 o'clock when everybody's watching Wheel of Fortune. But with the schools, the schools are at full capacity and they're using that energy in the middle of the day when the sun is shining the brightest. I think we should have solar panels on schools, as soon as we can get them on. Part of that is HECO and working with them to make sure that the grid is set up in a proper way. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the proposal from the last session on equipping public schools with solar panels to reduce costs was estimated to save $24 million. And that's money that can immediately be put back into the system. And from there, we still have to have a discussion on where that money would be best utilized. But that's money that we can take advantage of, right now by becoming more efficient.
So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be had right now, and so. There you go, low-hanging fruit, a new way of looking at old problems, and perhaps a way to finally get ahead of the challenges which face our communities year after year after year. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Jarret Keohokalole.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on your success so far. We wish you the best of luck and continue to be out there putting a new face on politics and being able to help us, all of us in our communities, take these challenges that come year after year and finally make a difference. We'll be back again next Wednesday for another topic on facing our future and how we as a state can face our future and thrive in the next century and generation. We'll see you next Wednesday. Aloha and have a good week.